your primary source for campaign 2018. In the Missouri Senate race, Democratic incumbent Senator Claire McCaskill debated Republican State Attorney General Josh Hawley. The Cook Political Report considers the race a toss-up. This is an hour.
From the 9 Network of Public Media in St. Louis, Missouri, this is the 2018 U.S. Senate debate, hosted by Judy Woodruff of the PBS NewsHour.
Good evening. I am Judy Woodruff. Welcome to this of the PBS NewsHour, and welcome to this debate in one of the most important Senate races in the country this year here in the state of Missouri. We are live at the 9 Network studios in St. Louis, and let's first meet the candidates. They are the incumbent Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill, and the Republican State Attorney General Josh Hawley. We did invite to this forum candidates who drew at least 10% support in the polls. We want to tell you that the Independent, the Green Party, and the Libertarian candidates did not reach that threshold. The questions tonight will come from Missouri voters here in our live audience in St. Louis, as well as in social media, and from journalists. Joining me are Jo Mannies. She is a political reporter for St. Louis Public Radio, and Mike Bush, author, anchor, and reporter at 5 on Your Side. We are so glad to have both of you here with us as well. The debate format is simple. Each candidate will have up to 2 minutes to respond to each question, and there may be follow-ups. At the end, each candidate will have 1 minute for closing remarks. There was a coin toss to decide the order. Mr. Hawley, the first question goes to you. The federal budget deficit, it had been dropping in recent years, but it has started to climb dramatically under President Trump. This year, it is up 17% to projected to reach $779 billion, projected to be over $1 trillion in the next 2 years. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has said this week that the main drivers of the deficit are entitlement programs like Social Security and Medicare, which he said should be considered for cutbacks. The president's chief economic advisor has said virtually the same thing. Do you agree, here's the question, do you agree with Leader McConnell that Social Security and Medicare are the leading drivers of the deficit and that they have to be reformed, cut back in some way in order to get the deficit under control?
Judy, thanks very much for that question, and let me just say thank you to KSDK and their partners for having us tonight. I want to first start by introducing a special guest I have with me in the audience. My wife Erin is here tonight. Thank you, sweetheart. And I want to say to my 2 little boys, we've got 2 little guys at home, Elijah, who's 5, and Blaze, who is 3, and they're supposed to be in bed, but I'm kind of guessing that they're with Grandma and Grandpa, so I'm guessing that they're up and probably watching. So I just want to say, boys, we surely love you. To your question, Judy, I do not support cutting Social Security or Medicare. I don't support any changes to those programs for anyone who is currently receiving benefits or who is going to be receiving benefits anytime in the near future. I think it is vital that we protect these programs that Americans have paid into with their hard-earned cash. One of the things that I disagree with Senator McCaskill about is that she voted to cut $716 billion from Medicare in order to pay for Obamacare. I think that was wrong. I think those cuts ought to be restored. And if we want to talk about the deficit and the drivers of deficit spending, I would start with Obamacare, going to cost over $2 trillion more over the next decade. It has proven to be outrageously expensive for federal taxpayers, but worse than that, it has proven to be outrageously expensive for the families of Missouri. Healthcare costs in this state are up 145%, premiums are, since 2013. That's between 2013 and 2017, by the way. I've had family after family tell me that they cannot afford their health care premiums, that they're having to get a second job or send a spouse back to work. And that's because of the policies that the Democrat Party and Senator McCaskill have supported. I think it is time that we got health care reform that works for the people of this state, that brings down the deficit, brings down costs, protects people with pre-existing conditions, and also young people on their parents' insurance up to age 26.
Thank you very much. Senator McCaskill.
Well, obviously, the tax cut that Josh Hawley supports. By the way, thanks, everybody. Thanks for having this tonight. I was too excited. Got right out of the gate. The tax cut that Josh Hawley supported is part of the problem here. It was supposed to pay for itself. Revenues are down, and wages are stagnant. In fact, wages are 1.8% lower in this country than they were a year ago. That is also one of our big problems. We should not be adding to the deficit in a strong economy like we are right now. It is the tax cut. It's so interesting that Josh mentioned the $716 billion. That was not a cut to Medicare in ACA. That was a cut to the profits of the health insurance companies. That was giving a haircut to the guaranteed profits of the health insurance companies in the Medicare Advantage program. And what did we do with that $715 billion? We filled the donut hole for Medicare Prescription Program Part D, so that seniors in Missouri can now enjoy more prescription drug benefits, which they desperately need right now. The person who's going to cut Medicare is, in fact, Josh Hawley. In his lawsuit, if it is successful, that benefit goes away, and guess who gets a payday? The health insurance companies of $715 billion. So the person who is actually using tax dollars to go to court to not only get rid of every consumer protection in the law that Missourians appreciate, but also removing free prevention programs in Medicare and removing the benefit for the donut hole in Medicare Part D. And the 145% he cites constantly, that is the cost on the exchanges for people who don't qualify for subsidies. It is too high, but it's only 5% of Missouri. We need to fix the problems in Obamacare, not throw it out. And his lawsuit is so reckless because there's no backup here. There's no backup plan for pre-existing conditions if he's successful. If he believes we should protect pre-existing conditions, he should ask tomorrow for the case to be dismissed.
Mike Bush.
Mr. Hawley, just piggybacking off what the senator said, last fall the Treasury Secretary said the tax cut plan would pay for itself and pay down the debt. A year later, as Judy mentioned, the deficit is up 17%. Corporate tax payments are down 31%, and all this with a strong economy. So if you're trying to lower the debt, shouldn't the tax cuts be on the table?
I'm not in favor of raising taxes, and I think that the Democrat Party has been very clear about what they want to do if they regain power. And of course, this seat here in Missouri, this race here in Missouri is going to decide which party controls the Senate. And it's a big choice between the party line liberalism of Senator McCaskill and between what you voted for in 2016. And those are two very different things. The people of this state voted to get taxes down on working families in the middle class. Senator McCaskill had a chance to vote for a middle class tax cut. She voted no. And in fact, she's voted to raise taxes or fees 200 times while she has been in the United States Senate. That is not what the families of our state need. So in order to get the deficit down, by the way, I would point out that the debt and deficit exploded under President Obama. And now I notice the Democrats say that now that there's been a middle class tax cut, now suddenly they have a problem with it. But I would say this, we've got to get spending under control, and I would start with Obamacare. It has been a giveaway to big insurance and big pharma. Big insurance and big pharma together wrote Obamacare. The insurance companies are getting record profits. They're doing great. You know, and I'm surprised to hear Senator McCaskill say that she's fine with the price increases in this state. You know, the average price increase on the exchange now up to almost $500 a month in premiums. Maybe she can afford that. Most Missouri families cannot. And Missouri family after Missouri family comes to me and says, we are desperate for help. They deserve it. Senator McCaskill hasn't given it.
Mr. Hawley, just very quickly to get back to the original question, are you saying that Medicare and Social Security don't need in any way to be reined in?
I am saying, Judy, that I would not support cuts to Medicare or Social Security.
And that they are not drivers of this deficit?
Well, I certainly would not touch them. I mean, I understand that there's quite a bit of spending associated with them, but I think that these are promises that we've made and promises that have to be kept.
The next question goes to Senator McCaskill. Most of the questions.
No, it's every other one. I don't.
No,
answer.
you may comment on what he said. Yes.
Okay, but do I answer? I'm confused about. I just want to make sure I know what the rules are. Do we both answer questions or just one of us?
If there's something that Mr. Hawley said that you want to respond to, we're giving you time to do so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I just thought that I didn't get a chance to answer Mike Bush's question. I just think it's important to remember that we were in a dramatic recession after the Bush administration, losing 800,000 jobs a month. And of course, we had to go to extraordinary measures to pull ourselves out of the recession. And the deficit did get too high. And the entire time, the other party was screaming about the debt and deficit. It got to over $1 trillion, but guess what? Then we went to work and we cut it in half. And now here we are, not in the middle of a recession, and it's going back up again. In fact, the increase to the debt, $62 billion of it is just interest. The Republican Party loves to talk about debt and deficit until they're in charge. And then it's crickets. It's absolutely crickets. So yes, we've got to look at all of it. No cuts to Social Security, no cuts to Medicare. As I said, Josh Hawley is proposing cuts to Medicare by his lawsuit.
No,
Next.
I just have to respond to that because that's flatly false. Only one person on this stage has voted to cut Medicare spending, and it's Senator McCaskill. And you can go look it up. She can characterize it and put as much lipstick on it as she wants. But the truth is, she voted to cut $716 billion from Medicare to pay for Obamacare. Now, we can debate the merits of that, but I don't support Medicare cuts. I've never proposed them. I just want to be clear on that, Judy.
Thank you. The next question does go to Senator McCaskill. Most of the questions tonight are going to be in domestic policy, but of course, as a United States Senator, you have oversight over foreign policy as well. This is a question, Senator, about U.S. relations with Saudi Arabia. After the disappearance of the Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi, all the attention has been focused on the Saudi government and on the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman. Based on what you know, do you believe that he was complicit in what appears to be a horrific murder? And if so, what specific actions should the U.S. take? Should it be a cutback in military aid, some sort of economic sanction, or some other step? Or is the alliance too important to tamper with?
I believe that if it is shown that the Prince of Saudi Arabia was involved in ordering the murder of this journalist in a brutal fashion, as is being reported in Turkish press, then everything has to be on the table. You know, we are a beacon to the world when it comes to our democracy and our values. We have a role in the world. I do not think we can abandon our place on top of the hill telling the rest of the world that we appreciate freedom of the press and we believe in human rights and democracy, and then look the other way because it might cause problems in terms of some kind of financial transactions. So I believe there must be, I think the Magnitsky sanctions would be appropriate. I think other sanctions could be appropriate. But this is a very serious situation, and I hope that we're not going to allow the Saudi government to whitewash this if in fact the facts are proven. If we can hear the tape, they're not even briefing Congress right now, Judy, on what actually they know in the intelligence community. We've been denied a brief. Bob Corker has said that they have told him no, they won't even give him a brief. Our intelligence community, we hear, believes there's circumstantial evidence that this was an ordered hit by the Saudi government.
Mr. Hawley.
I think we need to get the facts, and I think that Secretary Pompeo, I understand, has demanded the facts from the Saudi government, has given them a deadline. So we want the facts by this date, working with the Turkish government as well to get everything that they know. And if indeed the Saudi government has been involved or in any way in the death of this journalist, then I think that all options do need to be on the table and the consequences need to be severe. I think that this presidency has pursued a policy of strength abroad, which I agree with, confronting those who have attempted to harm this country, confronting those who have attempted to rip off this country. I think that's the right thing. You know, I mean, for too long we had a policy of weakness and appeasement abroad. I don't think we should go back to that. I know that Senator McCaskill's party supported a policy of weakness and appeasement and abroad for years. Barack Obama talked about leading from behind. If you lead from behind, you get left behind. And I think that it's time that we had this policy of strength, and the president's doing the right thing.
So both of you are saying everything's on the table, even if it means upsetting U.S. ally, very close ally, Israel, which has been very supportive of the Trump administration policies. Approach to Saudi Arabia. Senator McCaskill?
Well, I think the problem is we're trying to check Iran. That is the complicated part here, and obviously that's at the top of Israel's list. is they are very concerned that there is a united front against Iran and their misdeeds in a very dangerous neighborhood. But there are times, I think, that we've got to say to our allies, hey, we can't look the other way on this. I find it interesting that Josh would say that I somehow support appeasement. I don't think my colleagues on the Armed Services Committee would agree with him. I get chewed on by the left in my party for my view that there is peace through strength and my support of increases to the military budget. It has been a consistent record of mine, and yes, sometimes it means I separate from my party, but that's, I think, what Missourians demand of me, that I don't always take a party line.
The Israel point.
Yeah, the Israel point, I think, is an important one. I'm certainly do not in favor of doing anything that endangers our ally Israel. I think in this case, though, we've got to be tough with Saudi Arabia if they are participated. But let me just say, when it comes to Israel, Senator McCaskill voted or was supportive of the disastrous Iran deal, which made Israel, you talk about turning your back on the state of Israel. She also supported military cuts, drastic to the bone cuts to our military. I've got a sister who's a lieutenant commander in the United States Navy. She's told me about the effect of those cuts on troop morale, on readiness that Senator McCaskill has supported. She did that because it was the party line. And I think that we don't need a party line liberal in Washington. That's my criticism.
Senator McCaskill, did you want to respond, or we have another follow-up?
You know, Josh's campaign has a tortured relationship with the truth. It's just not true. There were cuts that were agreed to by both parties at a time when we were trying to figure out how to cap spending when Republicans were worried about deficits. But I have I just voted for, along with President Trump, agreeing with President Trump, that we needed a big increase to our military budget.
But she voted for the cuts. You know, she did vote for the cuts that were devastating to our military.
We're going to take a question now from Missouri voters, and to 9 Network's Ruth Ezel.
Judy, I'm here with Maria Watson. She is from Arnold. Her question is to Attorney General Hawley, and the subject is gun violence.
On this Thursday evening a year ago, I was in the ER of a St. Louis pediatric hospital with my 9-year-old son when a code silver was announced. That means an active shooter. During this very hour, I was trying to figure out how to barricade the door to my son's room and hide him. Gun violence has affected my family, my community, and is pervasive in this country. I am frustrated and angry when I see calls for common sense laws to address gun violence met with powerful resistance from the gun lobby, followed by inaction from our elected leaders. If elected, what will you do about this epidemic?
Well, Maria, thank you. First of all, thank you for your question, and thank you for being here this evening. And I'm sorry to hear about that experience, and I can't, as a father of 2 little boys, I can only begin to imagine what that was like. So thank you, and thank you for your courage in posing it and asking it. You know, and let me just start there that as the father of 2 young sons, when my wife and I drop our boys off at school or send them anywhere, we want them to be safe. And you know what? They deserve to be safe, just like your son deserves to be safe, and you deserve to be safe. And so I think we need to do everything that we can to keep firearms out of the hands of criminals, out of the hands of folks who are dangerous, the mentally ill and unstable. So here's where I would start. I think we need to fix the national background check system. We have a background check system, a national system, but it doesn't work that well because there's a giant loophole right in the middle of it. And that is, it doesn't include mental health records. It doesn't allow folks to actually see, has there been a mental health incident in this person's past? We need to fix that background check system so folks can see. You look at many of the terrible atrocities that have been committed just in recent months. Oftentimes, I think most times, the perpetrator, unfortunately, has some sort of mental health incident in their background that maybe local law enforcement knew about, but the folks who sold the firearms didn't, or the federal agents didn't. We need to fix that system. Now, Congress could have done this. They had the chance to do it, but they haven't. And it frankly baffles me as to why. Senator McCaskill voted against including health records in the background check system. I think that was wrong. I know that was the party line, but I think that was wrong. I think we need somebody who's going to stand up and say, we need to do what is right. Now, listen, I believe in the Second Amendment. I believe in protecting the Second Amendment rights of everybody and law-abiding folks. My view is we've got to keep weapons out of the hands of those who are criminals, of those who are dangerous and proven to be so, and protect the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens so we can protect our children. Thank you again for your question.
Thank you. Senator McCaskill.
Yeah, of course I support the Second Amendment, but what the NRA has peddled for years is that you can't support the Second Amendment and gun safety at the same time, and you can't. I was raised in a household where, in rural Missouri, where my dad hunting was something that we all knew we had to get out of the way because it was way more important to him at a certain time of the year than any of us. But that doesn't mean that we can't have gun safety measures. I support universal background checks, have voted for it. We came very close to passing it. The NRA was working as hard as it possibly could to stop universal background checks. I support banning bump stocks. That too, you would think after Las Vegas that would be so easy for us to get done. But no, there are way too many people, including most of the Republicans, that are afraid of the NRA. I think we've got to, we have our intelligence community telling us that there are people that are so dangerous terrorists that they can't fly in our airplanes, but they can go to any gun show in America. And in fact, terrorist magazines have advised them to do so and get weaponry. These are the things we must do. Common sense gun safety. All you have to do is turn on your television and you can tell who is supporting who. The NRA is very much in Josh Hawley's corner because they believe he will toe their line and be against universal background checks, be against banning bump stocks, being against no fly, no buy. I, on the other hand, believe very much that we should get those things done.
Did you want to respond?
Well, it is true that Senator McCaskill has an F rating from the NRA, and it's because she wants to take away Second Amendment rights for law-abiding citizens. And I don't. But the point is, you don't have to do that in order to protect people from violence. Look, I'm Missouri's chief law enforcement officer. It is my job to protect the people of Missouri. That is something that I am committed to, both as a law enforcement officer and as a father. And there are steps we can take right now, and we should take. Frankly, should have been taken a long time ago if folks have been willing to cross the party line. I will to protect the people of the state.
Joe Manis has a follow-up.
Yeah, it's a follow-up for both of you. I guess Senator McCaskill gets it first. There's been a lot of discussions about arming teachers, giving federal money to school districts to arm teachers. That's been a rather controversial idea. Some feel strongly, some don't. What is your position on that, and how would you deal with that?
Well, I know what the needs are right now. We just talked about the deficit. The federal government is not a primary funder of education in this country. That's done at the state and local level. I would never support using federal money with all the needs we have to buy guns for schools. If local communities want to do that, I'm not sure that it should be prohibited as long as there was proper training, but I would be against using federal dollars to do that.
I think it's up to the local school districts, Joe. I mean, I think local school districts can make these decisions about what's best for them, but I think we do need to get serious about protecting our schools. I do think we need to get serious. I mean, look, we spend a lot of time and resources, frankly, protecting things like football games and rock concerts, and that's fine, that's good. But as the father of two young children, I want to see our schools protected. Now, whether teachers should be armed or not, again, I think that's a decision for local folks to make.
Do you think federal money should go into arming teachers?
You know, I think that what would be better would be federal money given to school safety programs that where local folks can then decide how to do it and decide how to use it and decide what programs work best for them.
All right, we have another question from a Missouri voter, and back to Ruth.
We received this posting from Christy K. She lives in Afton. She writes, "Where does each of the candidates stand on tariffs? They hurt Missouri farmers. And what's your stance on giving farmers financial assistance?"
And this is a question for Senator McCaskill. Of course, it's a reference to President Trump's tariffs, mainly against China, and then the retaliatory tariffs that have affected the United States.
Yeah, the tariffs are brutal for Missouri. You know, I love where I live. I love our state, and I love every part of it, including the strength we have in agriculture. And our economy is so dependent on the exporting of agricultural goods. These tariffs have killed commodity prices. There's not a bean farmer in Missouri that's going to come out even this year. And the help that they're being given, frankly, in some instances is insulting. Corn, a penny a bushel, it's almost not worth the effort. They said $1.60 for beans. Well, now Sonny Perdue has just announced that it'll only be 80 cents. And then they can't even promise they're going to get the rest of the 80 cents. Farmers are trying to plan, and the market in China is being destroyed. We've worked years to establish a market for beans in China. It took a lot of money. The farmers of this state 1 out of every 3 or 4 rows of beans in Missouri goes to China. And that market's not going to come back, even if the tariffs go away, because they're filling that hole with imports from other states and paying their farmers to grow more beans. So it is really a problem here. And this is a good example. I mean, Josh Hawley has said, I disagree with nothing the president has done. I don't know anybody I haven't disagreed with on something. And this is where a senator from Missouri has to stand tall for agriculture and say these tariffs are hurting our agricultural economy, say nothing of small manufacturing and the raw costs. We've got a nail factory down in Poplar Bluff that is hanging on by a fingernail right now because of the raw cost going up of their input costs. And I have got dozens of manufacturers that I'm advocating for right now for an exclusion process that has been chaotic and incompetent.
2 minutes. Mr. Hawley.
Well, first of all, let me say that as somebody who comes from a farming family, this is an issue that matters a lot to me. And I'm proud to have the support of farmers across our state. The Missouri Farm Bureau, our largest farm group in the state, has endorsed me and many others. I agree with Senator McCaskill on one thing. We do need a senator who will stand tall for agriculture, and I wish it had been her, but it hasn't been. Senator McCaskill is an F from the American Farm Bureau. Farmers tell me as I travel all over the state that she won't even meet with them when they come to Washington, D.C. The president of the Farm Bureau told me she won't take his phone call. Now, I don't know what that's about. Missouri, our agriculture rather, is our #1 industry in the state. I don't know what that's about. Maybe she can tell us. But the truth is we need somebody who's going to stand up for farmers. And that's exactly what I'll do. Now, as to the tariffs, listen, we are in a trade war. It is a trade war that we did not start. Certainly our farmers didn't start it. China started it many years ago. But if we're going to be in the war, I'm for winning it. And I think that we've got to stand up and look to win it. Now, I think this president has had recent success that's tremendous in Canada and Mexico, our 2 largest trading partners. About 75% of our agriculture exports go there. That's a great victory. I wish Senator McCaskill would have been willing to stand up earlier to the people who've been ripping off our farmers, or just praise the president for the good work he's done with this agreement. I do disagree with the senator on aid. I think that if our farmers are getting retaliated against by China, they deserve to be supported. But when the president announced his aid package, she said that it was picking winners and losers and intervening in the market. Well, with all due respect, I want to pick winners and losers. I want to pick Missouri farmers as winners, and I want to pick China as a loser. And I think that's what we should be doing.
By the way, when I said that, it was because I was talking to farmers. They don't want a handout. They want a market. It was me having conversations with farmers, not their lobbyists, not a trade association that makes their decisions on a whole lot of stuff other than farming stuff, but farmers. I call them, I go to them, I'm on their farms, and they frankly knew that this $1.60 was not going to get them well on beans, much less a penny a bushel on corn. Yes, it's great, and I do. I think if you ask me what I think that President Trump has done, I think getting the New Deal on NAFTA it has great promise for continuity and stability for farmers in Missouri. That's terrific. I'm not afraid to compliment the president. But what's going on with this trade war with China hurts, and it's going to hurt for a long time for Missouri ag.
All right, the next question is from Mr. Hawley, and Joe Manis has that.
Okay, well, we're going to go back to your favorite topic, healthcare. Okay, this is a two-parter, so I have one version for the Attorney General, one version for the Senator. So please bear with me when you want to respond. Okay, first for Hawley, you are part of a lawsuit that would do away with the provisions in the Affordable Care Act, including the protections that would require insurance companies to cover people with pre-existing conditions without paying higher premiums. You say Congress can keep that protection without the ACA, but insurance companies say their prices will skyrocket if they have to cover pre-existing conditions without a mandate that everyone have insurance. Your plan that you proposed earlier has gotten mixed reviews. Some say it won't work. How would you resolve this, especially since you do want to get rid of the whole thing?
Well, thank you, Joe. First of all, let me say that this is an issue that's personal to me, as you know. Earlier this year, my wife and I learned that my older boy, our 5-year-old, has a rare chronic illness. It's a hip and joint condition, a pre-existing condition. And we're on the front end of that journey with him and as a family. And I think there's probably hardly a family in Missouri who hasn't been through that either with a child or for yourself or certainly with a loved one. wrangling with the insurance companies, trying to figure out, is this in network, is it not, can we get it covered, and then thinking what would happen if I didn't have insurance. So it's an important topic. The lawsuit is about Obamacare. It's about getting rid of Obamacare. And yes, I think we should repeal and replace Obamacare, because I think that people with pre-existing conditions like my boy are being held hostage to the dramatic price increases that they're being forced to pay. I was just talking to a family in Sykeston down on the Boot Heel, telling me about their son who has a pre-existing condition. His insurance, it used to be $300 a month. Now it's $1,200 a month and increasing. Now again, Senator McCaskill seems to make light of that, but for most families, that is simply unaffordable and unsustainable, and this is why we need to repeal and replace it. I favor forcing insurance companies to cover people like my own boy with pre-existing conditions in the law. There are a number of ways, Joe, then to take that into effect. You can do it like the state of Maine has done it, with a form of reinsurance, which is what I've talked about. You can do it with federal exchanges. You can do it with direct subsidies. There are multiple ways. My question is, will Senator McCaskill support any plan, to protect people with pre-existing conditions that isn't Obamacare? Any plan that isn't Obamacare. What we see from the Democrats is a full-throated defense of Obamacare day and night, but very little talk about actually protecting pre-existing conditions unless it's about Obamacare. I don't think people should be held hostage to that party line. I think we need somebody who'll work across the aisle on it.
Okay, well, why don't I ask the Senator this related question, because then you can weave in your answer. Your campaign centerpiece is your support for requiring insurance companies to cover pre-existing conditions, but you acknowledge that the Affordable Care Act is not perfect. What are the main problems, and how would you address them, especially if there's still a Republican in the White House and the Republicans continue to control Congress?
Well, I think it will be difficult because they've been in charge. They promised repeal and replace over and over and over again. They're in charge. They couldn't get enough Republican votes for their replace plan because it was going to hurt people so much. Republican senators were reluctant to vote for it. What we need to do is come together and fix the parts that we can fix. I agree with Josh Hawley that we can do more with reinsurance. We have a bill to do that. It's a bipartisan bill with Susan Collins and Senator Nelson. Mitch McConnell promised to vote on it, and he's refused to let us vote on it. There's another bill where we could do a copper plan that would bring more people into the exchanges at cheaper rates. Once again, we are not being allowed to vote on it. And let's really drill down on what Josh Hawley is saying. And by the way, I am so sorry that you interpreted my retweeting of a blog that I was being critical of your family. You have a beautiful family. You should be very proud of them. Your son is cute, and I can see that you and your wife love them very much. So I certainly had no intention. I'm not running my campaign on attacking somebody's family. Somebody is, but it's not me. I would tell you that this is all about a campaign now with Attorney General Hawley, because he has no backup if his lawsuit is successful. The prescription drug benefits and Medicare go away. The insurance companies get a payday. There's no more free prevention programs, no more kids on your policies till they're 26, no more limit on how much insurance companies can spend on their CEOs and hiring people to deny your claims. Obviously, no protection on pre-existing conditions. Now, here's what really tells you a lot. First of all, the lawyers asked the judges not to decide the case until after November. Wonder why. Secondly, when a Republican tried to give him cover and introduce a bill to cover pre-existing conditions, and Josh Hawley immediately tweeted he was for it, guess what the bill did? It said you had to give insurance for pre-existing conditions, but you didn't have to cover the pre-existing condition.
Mr. Hawley, do you want to respond?
There's a lot there of falsehood to respond to. I mean, listen, here's the bottom line, is that Senator McCaskill will not support any plan to cover people with pre-existing conditions that isn't Obamacare. Obamacare was written to hold hostage people with pre-existing conditions so that you'd have to have Obamacare supposedly to get this coverage, and that's exactly what she's based this campaign on. And that's simply false. We can protect people, and we must, with pre-existing conditions, but they shouldn't be forced to pay the prices they are paying now. They shouldn't have the narrowing of networks that we are seeing all over this state because of Obamacare. And so I will work across the party lines with anybody who shares the goal of protecting those with pre-existing conditions, and I think, too, young people on their parents' insurance. But I do not think that folks should be held hostage to the liberal, failed experiment of Obamacare, and we need somebody who's not just towing the party line on this.
Senator McCaskill, did you want to respond? Because I do have a quick follow-up.
Sure.
One. And that is to Mr. Hawley. Let's just talk specifics for just a moment. Sure. The Republican alternatives to the Affordable Care Act, the language on pre-existing conditions, this is both the House and Senate version, would assure coverage of pre-existing, but at the same time it would allow states to give insurance companies the ability to raise rates and not cover certain essential questions. So my question is that acceptable to you, or is it preferable to go to the language in the Affordable Care Act, which you file suit against?
That is not acceptable to me, what you just proposed, Judy, and certainly that's not or what you just read, and that's not my proposal. I think that I don't have a lot of sympathy, first of all, let me say, for insurance companies. I mean, someone mentioned earlier, Joe, I think that the insurance companies say that, well, we need this or that. You know, they're getting rich off Obamacare. They've got these open-ended payments that Obamacare gives them. That's your tax dollars. They're making record profits. Senator McCaskill takes more money from than anybody in Congress from the insurance industry, except for one other liberal. So I'm not too keen on the insurance industry. But I will say this, I think that we have got to require them to cover people with pre-existing conditions on the same terms as everybody else. And then the federal government should provide a guarantee for that. We can do that. It would be much less costly than Obamacare, but it would cover the folks who need the coverage.
You know, this is so frustrating. He has no plan. He has no plan that will work. The only plan he's put out there was a press release plan, and both editorial boards said it was almost laughable how unworkable it was. You don't go to court and get rid of important protections when there is no backup, when people will be in a free fall. You wait and you work with people and try to fix it and change it. That's why I have a record that I work across the aisle. I am more than happy to work with anybody to make sure these protections stay in place, but I sure as heck would not go to court with taxpayer money and get rid of it before the backup was in place.
All right, a question from Missouri voter Ruthie Zell.
Tyel McNary from St. Louis has a question for the senator, and it regards police-community relations.
What legislation, in your opinion, can be drafted to help ease racial tension between citizens and law enforcement without increasing law enforcement?
And that's for Senator McCaskill, correct?
Okay. Either and both.
Yeah, both of you, yeah. Starting with Senator McCaskill.
Well, when I was the prosecutor over in Kansas City, we had a huge problem. And it was a homicide rate. And what we found was we were having a great deal of difficulty getting witnesses to help us solve homicides because of a lack of trust in the neighborhood. No one wanted to talk to the police, much less put it out there and nail somebody for a homicide. So we began working on community policing. And not only did we do community policing, we went a step further and did community prosecution. So that in all the neighborhoods, especially those that were really struggling with high crime rates, the neighbors knew who the police officers were that they could call and trust, and they even knew which prosecutor to call and trust. We've got to get back to the point where police officers are not just answering 911 calls. They need to establish roots in a community, because this is all about trust. This is all about people in the community feeling that the police are working in their best interests, and the police understanding that the vast majority of the people in that neighborhood need nothing more than protection from them. And that's how we rebuild this. We can do it again if we could get the right resources into community policing, and the federal government can help with that.
Mr. Hawley.
Thank you very much for the question. Can you tell me your name one more time? Nice to meet you, and thank you again for your question. You know, I think that it's a hugely important question, and as the state's chief law enforcement officer, it's one that I take very seriously and have to deal with every day. And I just want to say this, that my bedrock principle is that every person and every community in this state deserves the fair and equal protection of the rule of law and the fair and equal benefits of the rule of law. Those protections from violence, those protections for personal safety, those protections for what you want to do with your life. And I think that's vitally important. Part of what I do as Attorney General and am empowered to do under the law is every year we assemble a report about where people are stopped, vehicle stops in the state. We get it from all of the data from all the different law enforcement agencies in the state. We put it together, and it's supposed to help show, you know, what are the racial backgrounds of people being stopped? Why were they stopped? Where do they come from? We've made some important changes to that stop, to that report rather, to get more information that'll help us understand. And I think taking steps like that, where we promote this dialogue, as you were talking about, between law enforcement and local communities is critical. I do want to say that as somebody who works with law enforcement, with cops from all across the state, I do think that I know that our cops are working hard and that they want to bring the fair and equal protection of the rule of law. I think they're doing a great job. They're certainly out there risking their lives. And by the way, cops from every neighborhood, from every city, from all kinds of backgrounds, they're doing a great job, and it's a privilege to get to work with them. Thank you for your question.
If I could follow up on that, I certainly agree with Josh that our police officers are brave and wonderful, and I'm honored to have worked with so many of them over the years. But I was surprised when the report came out, the racial profiling report that is done by the Attorney General's office, because the numbers were going the wrong way. Racial profiling was going up, not down. And I expected there to be a press conference. I expected there to be a summit called. I expected there to be a public dialogue about the fact that these numbers were going the wrong direction, and there was nothing. There was nothing.
I think that was directed at me. Rather than grandstanding or rushing to a microphone or trying to score cheap political points, what we did was actually work with the communities who were affected. We sat down with community leaders in Kansas City and St. Louis, or from across the country, or from across the state rather, and we said, what needs to happen in this report? What needs to change here? One of the things they said is we need to change the way that we get the data. We need more information. We need to see what communities these folks are from. We need to be able to have greater access to it, get even more information. So that's what we did, and we're going to continue doing that, not so that we can take political credit for it, but so that we can keep people safe.
All right, we have another question from a Missouri voter, Ruth Ezell, and this one is for the Attorney General.
Yes, for Attorney General Hawley, this is Tim Rudolph. He's from Brentwood, and he has a question about climate change.
Despite warnings from the scientific community that we must significantly decrease the effects of global warming, many large corporations oppose federal laws which burden their businesses. What should the United States do to ensure that we protect the planet without sacrificing our ability to be economically competitive?
And it's Tim. Is that
Tim,
right?
yes.
Tim, nice to meet you, and thank you for your question, and thank you for being here, and thank you for your passion for this issue. I really, really appreciate that. You know, I think that, look, climate change is an important topic, of course, and it is something that we need to be aware of. I'm sure the climate is changing and that humans are contributing to it, and we should look at science and see what the outcomes can be and what we can do. But I will say this, as somebody who comes from a farming family in a state where agriculture is our #1 industry, I am very concerned about environmental regulations coming from the EPA and elsewhere that choke off our family farms, that choke off small businesses. As I talk to farmers all over our state, what I hear from them over and over is the EPA is regulating how they can use water. It's regulating the land that they can use. It's regulating how they can do business. And I think, frankly, that this is all out of proportion, and I think it's a problem. It's a danger. And Senator McCaskill has supported those EPA regulations, like Waters of the United States, that she voted to keep after Missouri farmers said over and over and over that it was detrimental to them and was harming their livelihood. So I think this has got to be done in proportion. I think we've got to protect the folks like our family farmers, our small businesses who are providing our jobs, who are providing our food, who are providing our wages. Thank you.
Senator McCaskill.
Well, there's really two issues here. One is make sure regulation is reasonable. I actually opposed WOTUS, and there were other regulations like regulating farm dust. I said, are you kidding? That's nuts. You're not going to do that. But keep in mind that Attorney General Hawley thought Scott Pruitt was a great choice for the EPA. Scott Pruitt is someone who believes the EPA should not even be there, that there should be no regulations whatsoever. You know, when you look at the pictures from China and all the people walking around with masks on, you know, imagine if you had to stop at the city limits of St. Louis to get your mask before you went to the Cardinal game. Or how about water from the tap to mix formula? You know, most places in the world, you can't use tap water to mix formula because the drinking water is so dangerous. The climate change is real. It's time we trust our scientists. It's time we accept some reasonable regulation to keep our water clean and our airs pollution-free. And obviously, turning to alternative fuels is very important. That's why I've been a big supporter of biofuels, big supporter of solar and wind, a big supporter of the fuel efficiency standards that the president is going to abandon. All of these things matter when it comes to climate. We're seeing extreme weather because of climate. If we don't start respecting the science, we're really doing a huge disservice to my 11, almost 12 grandchildren.
All right. The next question comes from Mike Bush.
Mr. Hawley, Missouri voters overwhelmingly rejected making Missouri a right-to-work state, 67 to 32%. You've said in the past that nobody should be forced to pay union dues. This year, the National Right-to-Work Committee is telling their supporters that President Trump has personally promised to sign a national right-to-work bill if it comes across his desk. Is that something you would support?
I'd have to, I'm not familiar with that pledge, Mike, and so I'd have to see the details about what he's talking about. I think the people of Missouri have been pretty clear on this issue. They got the chance to vote on it, and the margin was pretty overwhelming, and what the people say is what goes. And I'm proud of the fact that I will support and what the people of my state support. If I have a criticism of Senator McCaskill, it's not that she is a bad person. She's not. I think she's a good person. It's not that her record has been terrible. She has had 36 years of distinguished service to this state and this country. But she does not represent this state anymore. She does not represent the people of Missouri. She has not accepted what the people said in 2016. She has not worked with this president or this administration on any major priority. She has not stood up and voted, whether it's the Supreme Court or Waters of the United States, which she voted to keep, by the way. She has simply not voted with this state anymore. She's become a party line liberal, and that is, I think, the biggest criticism I have.
So just so I'm clear, you no longer support right to work in Missouri?
You asked me about the president, and I don't know what he has said on that, and you asked me about a bill that I haven't seen. So I'd have to see both, Mike, before I comment.
That's kind of, I think, a dodge. I don't think he wants to say anything different than the president because he's worried what happens if he says anything different than the president. Josh Hawley's been very clear that he supported right to work. His first campaign, which was a very short time ago, you might remember the Ladders ad, a very short time ago, he said his campaign was funded almost entirely by the biggest right to work advocate in the state. 75%, over $4 million stroked one family to his campaign to put him in the Attorney General's office. Obviously, he supported right to work. He's against increasing the minimum wage. He won't tell you how he voted on Prop A. You know, here's the thing when you go to the Senate. I know I cast votes that a lot of Missourians disagree with. I get that. But you got to cast the vote. And you got to be upfront about where you stand. You're not going to make everybody happy. And I will tell you, I will never be afraid to tell a president, whether it was President Obama on Keystone Pipeline or whether it's President Trump on right to work for less, I am never going to be afraid to stand up for what I believe in and what I think I owe the people of Missouri in terms of a clear answer.
Mr. Hawley, I just want to pick up on something the senator said, and that is she mentioned the minimum wage, which of course is on the ballot in Missouri this year. What is your position on it, on raising it? And Senator, if you could clarify your position.
Yeah, I'm going to vote no on that particular provision. I think that we need a wage increase, and we need it across the board. And one of the things, but I'm going to vote no on the Missouri measure because I'm worried that it will raise the minimum here quickly and out of step with other states. I don't want to see jobs lost. Let me say this though, Judy. Wage growth is at a 10-year high in this country. Wages have been stagnant for decades. Senator McCaskill has been in politics for 36 years. During that entire time, jobs have gone overseas. She's watched thousands of jobs leave this state. Wages have been flat or declining in this state. They are just now beginning to grow. Middle-class incomes beginning to grow, reaching a new high. And what does Senator McCaskill want to do? Adopt the party line, raise your taxes. She's already talked about it tonight. She voted no on the tax cut. She wants to reverse it and raise your taxes, raise middle-class taxes. I think that we cannot afford to go back to falling wages and to sending jobs overseas. And that's why I would not vote for the Liberal Party line.
I never said I would raise taxes on the middle class, ever, ever. What I've always said is let's talk about people that are making millions of dollars and their taxes. You know, this is fascinating to me. This is such a reasonable minimum wage proposal. He likes to lecture about the working people and flyover country and how they're getting ignored. This is an 85 cents a year increase, gradually going up to $12 an hour. Amazon's already paying $15 an hour. We have over 100,000 parents in Missouri that are trying to raise their children on a minimum wage job. Raising the minimum wage is the right thing to do, and wages are not growing between last year and this year, the first 3 quarters, wages, real wages, have gone down 1.8%. That's after the tax cut that was supposed to put all this money in everybody's pockets. Corporate profits are way up, the deficit's up, but wages aren't. We need to support the minimum wage, and I do 100%.
Judy, can I just, yeah, thank you very much. Look, just to be clear, Senator McCaskill had the chance to vote for a middle-class tax cut. She's raised your taxes over 200 times. She had the chance to vote for one. She voted no. She voted to keep your taxes higher. And then she referred to them as scraps. That wasn't Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi called them crumbs. Senator McCaskill called them scraps. Now, they may be scraps to her, but they are not scraps. The tax cut, putting more money in the pockets of hardworking Missourians, doubling the child tax credit. Average Missouri family saved about $1,200 a year. That's real money for the people of Missouri. I do not want to see it taken away. We need somebody who's not just following the Liberal Party line.
Well, the wages have not gone up. And the reason I was against the tax bill was not because I wasn't willing to vote for a middle-class tax cut. It was because it was so favored and so heavily towards the very rich.
The next question comes from a Missouri voter, Ruth Ezell.
Senator McCaskill, Kevin Smith from Canton has a question about the border wall.
Border security is a very important issue to me. As a retired veteran, I think it's important for us to secure our borders. Will you tonight commit to support President Trump's effort to build a wall on our southern border?
I have certainly voted and worked on a bill that would have given $25 billion towards border security. I've been to the border. I have gone on night patrol with the Border Patrol agents. I have asked them, what do we need to secure the border? It's also very important to me that we secure the border. And they said the number one thing they needed was technology, the ability to see who was coming and where. They were relying on equipment, frankly, that they'd taped together to try to have clear visual. Number 2, lateral access roads. There are many instances where smugglers are coming across and they can't get to them safely or protect their fellow brothers and sisters that are securing the border. And certainly more personnel. And I have been somebody who has, in fact, worked to secure more personnel on the border. And more barriers in some places. But, you know, when you're down there on the border, you'd go along the wall and then there's this big hole where there's a pickup truck sitting. And I said, what's up with that? Why does that guy have to sit there in the pickup truck? And they said, well, the litigation over the government taking the farmland is still ongoing. And it's been 15 years, 10 years, 15 years. So it is not as easy as just saying sea to shining sea wall. Some places we do need more wall. And I'm more than happy to support that. All of these things is why the Border Patrol agents who also endorsed President Trump have endorsed me in this Senate race.
Mr. Hawley.
Yeah, thank you. Kevin, thank you very much for that question. Let me come around to you so I can see you. And I think you said you're a veteran. Thank you all. Thank you for your service to this country. Thank you very much. I think I can answer your question a little more simply than all of that. Yes is the answer. I support a border wall. I will support the president in getting funding for a border wall. You know, Senator McCaskill has called the wall embarrassing. They picked up on a little bit just there, but that's her word. She said it's embarrassing. She has mocked President Trump for wanting to build a wall. I think we need a wall. I think we need to secure our border. I think it's a basic rule of law issue. I'm a law enforcement agent. We need to actually enforce the laws of this country. Now we've got this migrant caravan that is coming towards the border, thousands and thousands of people, growing, we're told in news reports, by the day. This could be a disastrous situation. We need a secure border. Washington has had the chance to do this for years, and they haven't done it. Senator McCaskill has voted against funding for the wall. She even wouldn't agree to the president's DACA plan, a very generous proposal, but why? It had wall funding in it, so she voted against it. We need somebody who is going to actually stand with our law enforcement agents on the border, somebody who knows we need to secure this border, and that ultimately it's about the sovereign rights of this country, and it's about citizenship. It's about respecting and protecting American citizens. We don't need party line liberalism. We need somebody who's actually going to respond to the needs of the state, and I will. Thank you for your question.
Senator McCaskill, did you have a response?
Well, the Border Patrol agents on the border have endorsed me, not Attorney General Hawley. And it is because of my thoughtful, and it's not as simple as a one-liner. It's more complicated than that. It is not, I mean, most of the people who we are having to deal with on the border are not trying to evade. They're walking up to the ports of entry and saying, we're turning ourselves in. The wall doesn't even have any impact on that. So this is complicated and hard. That's why I sat in a room for days with 15 Republicans and 13 Democrats trying to work out compromises, and we almost got there. We got to 58 votes. I'm not going to give up until we get to 60 for comprehensive immigration reform that includes good border security.
I would just say that, look, Senator McCaskill has been in Washington a long time, 12 years. She's been in politics 36 years. She has had many opportunities to step forward and cross the party aisle, work across party lines, and get this done for the security of this country. And she has not done it. She has voted no on wall funding. She has mocked the idea of it. She rejected a Dreamers Compromise plan because of wall funding. And I'm afraid that it's a very similar story, whether it's health care, whether it's protecting Medicare. You can go down the list. Senator McCaskill has been in office 12 years in Washington. It's just the party line over and over and over. That's not what Missouri wants.
Just a quick follow-up to that, Attorney General. The Republican congressman who represents the longest stretch of the border on the southern side is Congressman Will Hurd of Texas. His comment on the wall, among others, he said, what we have to remember is every mile of the border is different from every other mile. Building a 30-foot-high concrete structure that takes 4 hours to penetrate is the equivalent of the bridge to nowhere, and I'm quoting him. And he said, if you don't have a border patrol to respond to threats on a physical structure, that physical structure is not actually a barrier. So my question to you is, here's a fellow Republican with this view.
You know, there are lots of excuses. Washington makes excuses all the time. We've heard some of them here tonight about why this just can't quite be done. Senator McCaskill talked about we need to wait until we get health care reform. The people of Missouri have been waiting an awfully long time. While you've been waiting, your prices have been going through the ceiling. While you've been waiting, your doctor networks have been narrowing. While you've been waiting, the insurance companies have made a killing on the border. While we have been waiting, illegal immigrants have been pouring across the border, bringing gangs, bringing drugs, bringing violence, and by the way, pushing down wages as well in this state and elsewhere. I think it's enough waiting, enough excuses. Let's get something done. We need someone who's going to cross party lines to do it.
Let me just say quickly that in 2000, there were 1.6 million people apprehended on the border. 1.6 million. Last year, it was 300,000. We do not have an increasing problem. We still have a problem. I'm not minimizing it. But there are far fewer people trying to come across and being apprehended illegally last year than there was obviously a decade ago. And the other thing I would just say is by an independent group that looks at every vote, I am the 5th most likely member of the Senate to break with my party. The 5th most likely senator to break with my party. That's because I look at every issue on its merits and not on a party line.
Despite voting with Chuck Schumer 90% of the time, however. So apparently Chuck Schumer must be on that.
And President Trump 50% of the time.
Time now for closing comments from each of you. Senator McCaskill, you are first.
Yes. You know, I have traveled the state I loved and I've listened. And, you know, we have a lot of differences. But there's so many things Missourians agree on. Campaigns are a time that we highlight differences. But I think they should also be a time that voters take a hard look at which candidate can do more than criticize their opponent. Who can actually find common ground? I'm very proud of what I've gotten done in the Senate. Tonight on my website, ClaireMcCaskill.com, you can find 100 accomplishments that I have gotten across the finish line for Missourians. I did that by working across the aisle, listening and, yes, sometimes compromising. Whether it's veterans benefits or bringing down the cost of prescription drugs, I will work with anyone, anytime to make things better. Can I be pushy? Yes. Obnoxious sometimes? Yeah, maybe. But I will roll up my sleeves, be independent, and work as hard as I know how for the families of Missouri all day long. Josh, I would be honored to have your vote.
Mr. Hawley.
Thank you so much, and thank you again for having us tonight. You know, I just want to say that I respect Senator McCaskill's service, as I said earlier. I respect her years of service to the state and to this country. But the truth of the matter is, it's just not working anymore. Senator McCaskill's been in politics for 36 years. She's been in Washington for 12 years. And over that time, she has become a party line politician. She said that she'd be independent. She said that she would be bipartisan, but she hasn't been. Whether it's border security or health care, whether it's putting pro-Constitution judges on the bench. Every priority that this state has said is at the top of their list, whether it was 2016 or earlier, Senator McCaskill has voted against. And here's what I think we need. It's time we had someone in Washington who wasn't part of the old battles, who doesn't owe anything to anybody, but who is going to go and represent the people of this state, who will stand with the people of this state every single time, who's proud of our way of life, who knows it, who loves it, and who will represent it. And I ask for your vote.
Thank you, Mr. Hawley. I want to thank both of the candidates, the Attorney General, Josh Hawley, Senator Claire McCaskill. Thanks to both of you. Thanks to all of our participants, to Mike Bush, to Joe Manis, to Ruth Ezell, our live audience here in St. Louis. Don't forget to vote. Election Day is November the 6th. Thank you for joining us.
With 12 days until the midterm